Luhmühlen, the Longines 5-star 3-day event, 4-star short. And I was lucky enough to get a visit there starting Thursday afternoon and started to do the live stream commentary with Spencer Sturmey on Thursday afternoon. We had all of Friday watching dressage, which is really, really good for me because I'm not a great dressage watcher unless I have a job to do, which I did. And I really enjoy it, particularly with Spencer, who was with Carl Hester for quite a number of years and is very understanding of the need for horses to learn to be in self carriage. And I find it really interesting sitting next to him. And very often, even though I'm the commentator, I'm meant to know what I'm commentating about. Very often I say, Spencer, what did you think of that? And quite often the flying changes were hard to see if they were true. And I blame the angle of the camera and all that, but we were lucky. We had two good cameras there. And I shouldn't be blaming the angle of the camera, but it is difficult. And we do know that some judges, depending on where their box is, it's sometimes difficult to see how true a change is, which is why there's somebody sitting up in the gods watching the changes. And if there's too much of a disparity between the three judges' marks, at the end of the test, they get them all to look at it again on the screen and redo their marks, the one that was out of focus with the others. So that's a way of trying to make it fairer because depending on the angle of the judges' boxes, they can't always see the truth of the change and whether they come exactly together. Well, I couldn't see it either, really, only I don't think I have enough practice. And Spencer was wonderful and really loves his dressage and has a wonderful way of explaining how it should feel and how it should be. And I always learn lots when I'm doing live stream with him on dressage. It's wonderful. So we thoroughly enjoyed that test. And I mean, the best marks would be late 20s, and the not so good marks would be mid 40s. But let me tell you, the not so good tests were, in my day, they would have been right in the middle of the pack. They would not have been out the bottom. The standard has risen so exponentially in the last 20 years that what now gets a bottom mark is a sort of reasonable test. There's just a few things that aren't right, or maybe the horse is a little bit not carrying himself or a little bit hollow or whatever. But we used to have these lunatic tests. I mean, I was one of them on a wonderful thoroughbred called Village Gossip. That was nearly always bottom and hideous, sort of high head carriage, hollow as anything. And it took me till he was 15 for me to learn that if I just sat quiet and left my hands on his withers with a contact and didn't try and get him on the bit and get him down and do all the things we used to do before we understood about self carriage, he came onto the bit at 15 and he actually beat Bruce Davison and the world champion horse Mike Tango at Punchestown. And it took till he was 15 for me to understand this. And he carried off that 3-day event in Ireland, having been second at 7 major internationals, because I had always been trying to get his head down and he wouldn't have it. So I've learned a bit since then, I have to say. But the really thrilling thing watching the dressage is how much everybody else has learned and how much they are sort of so ahead of the game that we played. And I used to remember thinking that Bruce Davidson and Mike Plum from America and Carl Schultz from Germany were the very best dressage riders. And when I watch their tests now on a flashback on YouTube, I think we didn't have a clue in comparison to where everybody is now, which is fun because it means that the sport is moving ahead. But it still seems to me that there isn't an overall understanding of self carriage. And that's something that our own Carl Hester has really put out there in the pure dressage world. And I noticed an enormous difference between commentating in London in 212. I didn't get to commentate in Rio 216 and Tokyo in 221. That span of time, I was commentating on the real dressage, and I noticed a huge difference from London to Tokyo. And I do put it at the feet of Carl. I think he's been so super successful, and I think he has began to help the world understand what dressage is all about. And it isn't about force, it is about self carriage, it is about dancing. And the wonderful Jessica, who won the gold medal in the dressage in Tokyo, and then promptly had a baby, so didn't appear the following year. She and that mare, who's no beauty, if you put her in a show class, I don't think she'd do very well, but she loves her game, and Jessica and her just adore each other. And she goes into that arena and she just dances. And it's not over exaggerated, it's just beautifully light and wonderfully true. And I do feel Carl has had a lot to do with bringing the best out of many people's riding and training. And there's still people that are on another track, and that will always be the case, I guess. But as they see themselves not getting such good marks and see other people getting better, they'll start to try to understand what is an incredible skill, how you get a horse off your seat and carrying himself. It's not something I could ever do. But it is that skill that many of them have now achieved in eventing. So it was wonderful to watch the Longines 5-star at Luhmühlen and the 4-star short, which was backed up by Mesmer. The Mesmer trophy was actually for the best German, and Mesmer is a type of very delicious tea. So all sorts of sponsors coming from different directions, which was very exciting. We also, talking about sponsors at Luhmühlen, we had Porsche, and I think, be corrected here, but I think that's the first time I've seen Porsche come fully into top level eventing. And I chatted to the frightfully trendy guy who was in charge of Porsche and thought he was very, very good and very good news. And it was exciting to see these Porsche cars all over the place. And in one corner of the arena, it was spattered in mud, and it was a cross-country Porsche, but still in the streamline of the Porsche. It wasn't the four-wheel drive. I think it's KN, is it, that one? It was actually a streamlined sports car that was just an off-roader as well as an autobahner. So it was fun to have them. But Longines stuck with the 5-star and the 4-star as the overall sponsors, and Chili Pepper were the company that got the live stream together. And Mark, who does a wonderful job, and cameramen who were superb. And if anybody watched Luhmühlen, there was the funniest bit in coming to the end of the cross country of this child in a waterproof suit. Not a bad idea because the weather was very up and down on Saturday, and the child was kicking around as children do, age 2, in a puddle, jumping up and down, the waterproof suit getting nicely splattered. And the father comes along and picks his child up, literally by the back of the jacket, and it hangs like a sort of dead teddy bear as he sort of walks along with him swinging or her swinging. And it was just, it sounds not so funny on here, but it was the funniest thing I think any of us have ever seen, and it went viral instantly. And Spencer, over the top of this wonderful bit of camera work, just mentioned, "That's me picking you up, Lucinda," which was highly appropriate, seeing as he gets me off the hook when I get stuck very often. I'm very lucky to have him alongside. So the cross country was a proper good 5-star. Mike Etherington Smith has been there 2 or 3 years now, picked over from Mark Phillips, and it's a very difficult thing to build in that particular country because there's quite a strong anti, and there's a particular newspaper called The Build that quite often features negativity about horse sports. And we know we're all in a tricky situation with what gives you the right to ride a horse brigade, and we know that we've got to be whiter than white, and there's nothing wrong in that, because I'd like to think those of us that adore our horses look after them as well as we possibly can, but we've just got to show that. And I think it was a very good course because it did ask some 5-star questions. There was 1 or 2 fences I didn't really know how we're going to jump, and there was 1 or 2 at badminton, and I always think that's the mark of a 5-star. 4-star, you're pretty sure you know, but sometimes you get it wrong. And it was cracking brilliant ground. And Luhmühlen has been known to have some quite bone rocking ground. And even though it's sand, as those of you that study ground know, that hard sand can be very jarry, but they've done a huge amount over the years since I used to do European championships and world championships there back in the 70s and 80s, 100 years ago, where it was quite heathlandy, and now they've sown a massive grass and there's a thick swath of grass. The course is more or less permanently going the same route, but sometimes one way, sometimes another. The water jumps more or less permanent there. and it's just grown in stature thanks to the wonderful Julia Otto and her team, who've been in situ for 25 years, making Luhmühlen what it is now. And it was always a wonderful event, but it's moved with the times in no uncertain terms. So it's a thorough joy to be there. And it has this extraordinary friendliness about it. And Badminton and Burley are huge and wonderful, but because of their size, they can't have quite the same. There's a wonderful word called gemütlich in Germany, which sort of means cozy and friendly. And Luhmühlen is really gemütlich, but very well run. And you run into the sort of the definite problems if you haven't got the right passes. You know, they know you can't come in here and that sort of thing. But once you get the right passes, you have a lovely, lovely time. So the cross country started a little bit wet, but the ground there can take it. They've actually had to do a little bit of watering on some places that are packed. And the first out, Tom McEwen and Kulizer, was absolutely stunning, CHF Kulizer, and did an amazing round over all these fences. We weren't quite sure how they were going to ride, but Tom is a past master of cross country now. And later, I think it was probably Sunday morning, I said, "My goodness, well done. What a responsibility. You went so well and rode her so well, and she looked quite green." And he said, "Well, you know, she's 14. She's not that green, but she absolutely has her own way, and you cannot tell her what to do." And so that's probably why she looked a little bit green at times, because she doesn't listen to any suggestions. She does her own thing. And that rung true. And I'm sure those of you out there will also recognize that certain, particularly mares, just just don't want to be told what to do, and you have to find a way of making it feel it's their idea, rather like being a good wife, I guess. So he did a magnificent job and made everybody a little bit more confident that the whole thing could work. And the rain stopped, and out went more people, and all of a sudden, in the middle of the competition, coming nearer to the last three quarters, well, the last quarter, this extraordinary storm struck up, and it came from nowhere in about 60, 70 seconds. It was just extraordinary. And if I'd been at sea, I would have been really, really frightened, because I think it would have whipped my boat round in 100 circles and turned it over. Flower pots flew across the main arena. Advertising boards were ripped off the railings from the main arena and shot across. Tarpaulin that was happily sat somewhere near our screen sort of leapt into the air and tried to wrap itself round us. It was fierce. And a tree fell down, luckily not hurting anybody over in the car park. And very, very astutely, the course was stopped. And it was a very good call, because there was very little time to make that decision, because this happened so quickly. I have actually never been in a tempest like that. And they stopped the course, and on the course was Tom McEwen on Brookfield Quality's his second ride. And he, I think, would probably have been sat there for 10, 15 minutes. And the people starting, it's just my score sheet, I'm trying to put together back to front, so that doesn't help. There was other people that were about to start that were stuck in under the trees and the start box, and oh my goodness. And after about 10 minutes, there was a strike of lightning, and you count the seconds, don't you, between the lightning and the thunder, and it was about 3 seconds, so it was very close. And that really scared me, because I could see over in the start area there was people sheltering from this rabid rain under trees, and we all know what lightning conductors they are. Anyhow, as luck would have it, there was no more lightning and thunder, and the storm left almost as quickly as it arrived. It was quite extraordinary. And Brookfield Quality was restarted and came, I should think, within 2 fences he was restarted. He was in the arena right underneath us. And Spencer, I didn't notice this. Spencer noticed that he had blood coming from a nostril, and old Bright Eyes here was far too busy watching all that he was doing. And I probably should have been watching the screen, but I tend to watch live when they come through, because you see a totally different dimension live. It's fascinating. You're meant to commentate on what you see on the screen, and if you're going to watch live, you're going to be very careful you don't say something that hasn't been visible on the screen. but you get a very, very different impression of both dressage and cross country and show jumping if you see some of it live. And it literally adds another dimension, and the television takes that dimension away. So I didn't spot this little bit of blood coming from his nose until he was about 3/4 of a kilometre, maybe a kilometre away from the main arena, jumping another couple of fences, and then I saw it full on. And as I saw it, Tom pulled up, because clearly there'd been a little bit of something in his nose when he'd been pulled up before, when the storm was on, and they'd wiped it away. And the rule goes, I gather, that if you wipe the blood away and it doesn't come back, you're okay, you can go on, because it might just have been a bit of fickle nosebleed or whatever. But this apparently did come from somewhere a bit deeper, but nothing to do with a fibrillating heart, which it can sometimes be. So a bit of investigation will go on there. But Tom pulled up before anybody pulled him up, which is a really nice way for it to be done. He'd had this magnificent ride on Kuliza, and she ended up, after a great show jumping round, in second place. So that was all very satisfactory for him, although not so satisfactory with Brookfield quality. So the 5-star came to an end, and we'd seen some wonderful stuff, including a particularly not amusing at the time, but in hindsight, amusing situation from our American mate, Catherine Coleman, who'd ridden Monbeg by design. And he's a fantastic horse, and she has a great partnership with him, and had a lovely trip around Badminton last year. And he was in the absolute eye of the rain before we got the tempest. And so she put some sticky stuff on her breeches, which I used to do a lot. It used to be in my day, it was called resin. But Monbeg Senna, sorry, not Monbeg by design, wrong name. I thought that was wrong. And so she put that all over her breeches, and she put it on her gloves too, because some of these sort of new material gloves aren't just as grabby as what I used to wear, which was hand knitted string gloves, and they never ever slipped, didn't matter how wet they got. And I lost my first badminton by wearing leather gloves, and the reins just went straight through my hands, and I had a run out at Tom Smith's walls. And otherwise that would have been my lucky number 7, or it would have been the first one, but it would have made that wonderful total of my lucky number. But it wasn't to be. So I find some of these newfangled gloves are not as grippy as they need to be when they get soaked. Anyhow, so Catherine, I thought, very intelligently put some of the sticky stuff on her rein. So what happens? She dumps 5A. 5B is an enormous spread. The horse reaches for it, and the reins don't slip through her hands, and she gets pulled forward. Then she's no chance of turning for 5C, and ran straight past it. And then she was trying to wipe all this stuff off on her horse's neck, because she was realizing that she'd now got gluey hands instead of just tacky hands. And I think probably if she could have got the gloves off, she would have got them off and threw them away. But it's pretty difficult to get them off because they cling, don't they? Especially when they're wet. So that was a bit disappointing, but it was just a sort of interesting aside as to how you can do your very best to avert the slipperiness of the rain. But sometimes it works against you, and it did for Catherine here. But otherwise, a magnificent run, even with 2 sticky hands. So the 5-star wound up, and the 4-star short started, which was a course that was a couple of miles long, half the length really. I think it was 17 minutes instead of, oh funny, I forget now what the long was. 10:50 maybe. I should have it written down somewhere, but I can't find it. So it was just over half the short, and took in a little bit of the long, but mostly separate fences. And I thought when I walked it was a little bit light, but it proved to be a very successful, what really was an Olympic trial. And that was what was such fun about being there, because there was so many horses that were trying to get themselves to the Olympic Games, using it as a final trial or a final run or whatever, from many different parts of the world. And it was probably a very good thing that it wasn't any tougher, because there was enough mistakes. And when it came to the really good ones, the ones that are lining themselves up for Paris, still only 2 people were inside the time, which I thought was a magnificent effort from the course designer. And it did come down. It's getting more and more like top class show jumping now. You're winning and losing by decimal points like show jumping does, because the clock is so important, which puts a very different strain on you in the cross country. You want to take that little bit of extra time and give your horse that little bit longer. And if you do, you're going to take a second that may cost you the competition. And it's a tremendous judgment as to whether you take that second or that 3 seconds and give your horse more chance, or whether you can afford to shave it off and give him less chance because he's more experienced, he can read fences quicker and react quicker. And that's where it's so fascinating. You have to know your horse so well. And so they proved to know their horses so well. And the top lot stayed more or less around the top end, with let me see, Ros Cantor way out in front in the short format. I know, sorry, Ros Cantor way out in front of, I get this muddled all the time, in the long format on Isolot, the horse that she took to Badminton and who got a little bit of stage fright and didn't really have a great time the first half third of the course. And so she brought him home and took him to Luhmühlen, where he looked altogether a much more grown up horse who was coping with the situation, albeit the audience spectators are nothing like what we have at Badminton that might have worried him. But Ros also said that she gives him a bit of work before the cross country because he is a bit spooky, and if he has a bit of work, he doesn't spook so much. And she hadn't done it really so much at Badminton because she wanted him to have all his energy for the soft ground and the big Badminton fences, and he was therefore too fresh, if you like it, in that first half. So she duly did her bit and had, I thought, a really grown up round from Isolot in the long, in the 5-star long, and came into the show jumping with a whopping lead. You don't see them very often. She had 2 fences in hand and a handful of, not a handful, but a couple of timefalls, I can't remember exactly what. And to our astonishment, because he's a very good jumper, he had 2 down and he was just a second too slow and went down to 4th place, which brought up, I believe, the first Belgium ever to win a 5-star long in Lara de Liederkerke-Meijer on a horse that not only had her family and her bred in their wonderful studded Arville, where they also hold a magnificent international event, but she'd also ridden this mare's mother in the World Championships, not absolutely certain where. I need Spencer here, but she'd ridden her in the World Championship some 10, 12 years ago. So this was the most incredible achievement, not just to beat all these smart people like Michael Jung on Fisher Chipmunk. Oh, hang on, that's the wrong thing. Sorry. Yasmin Ingham on Rehi, Ros, as I said, on Isolot, and a handful of extremely good British people that were out there, and some from New Zealand, and where else have we got them from? Germany, a couple of really good Germans, America, Ireland. So she'd done incredibly well, Lara, to get this 5-star under her belt, and it was actually tear worthy. I was awfully glad that Spencer was doing some commentary then, because I wasn't able to speak for a bit because I was so moved and touched that she should actually win this, even at the expense of Isolot and Ros. And I sort of felt really grateful to Isolot and Ros, because by having 2 fences down and dropping from 1st to 4th, disappointing as it was for them both, she sort of showed that eventing, however brilliant you are, and she is really riding the crest of a wave these last couple of years, things can still go wrong. And it makes it attainable and achievable by others if the same person that has been doing really well actually then has something go a little bit wrong. And I think that it just humanizes the whole thing. And Ros was so interesting about it. She said, it's given me really something to work on, because when she won Poe on a clear show jumping round, but Poe was a twisty turny course and she could keep his quality of canter much better. and the Luhmühlen show jumping was right up to standard, but it was a bit more flowing, and she found it harder to keep his quality of canter without the turn. So she said, I know what I've got to work on. I've got to go and work on a canter that keeps the bounce and the bound in it, even though I haven't got the corners and the turns to help me. So she left there on a real sort of positive as to how she could help Isolot be better. And that is so typical of Ros Cantor and most others that are at the top level. They always find something they can learn from in a disappointment. And very often in a victory, they still find plenty that they can learn from and do better. So I found that wonderful. So we had Lara Liederkerke winning on Huni Darville, homebred, mother homebred. We had Tom McEwen and Kuliza, who were second. And then we had, and Kuliza belonged to Miss Vicky Bates and Mr. David Myers. And then we had Reiki DJ and Yaz Ingham, Jeanette Ching and the Sue Davis Fund, Jeanette's mum, who sadly died and left this wonderful fund to keep running, Yasmin. And she was third. Ros was fourth on Isolot, Alice Casburn, top stuff on top spin, fifth. Kirsty Chabet was sixth. And then a very, very good German rider, Jenny Kuhnler. Sorry, she's German by name, but Irish by breeding. And Polly Blue Eyes, who did come from the Luhmühlen area as a 7-8-year-old, I think, into the Irish hands of the Kuhnlers. She was seventh and eighth, and was actually our ride of the day on the Friday, the dressage day. She did such a great job on Sammy Davis Jr., which was her horse that was eighth. So it was terrific. And then David Dole, Pietra Sandai, Sam Lissington from New Zealand, Caroline Harris wound up from Great Britain, the top 12. So it was a very exciting competition indeed. And then having watched the 5-star long cross country and watched the 5-star short and seeing how close they finished, mostly on time, we then watched them show jump a different course, one or two similar types of lines, but otherwise a very different course, and interestingly a similar time. I think one was 78 seconds and one was 79. And the time was quite hard to get in the long, and the early ones did fall foul of it, and it was actually made a second or 2 seconds longer, but they had to get a bit of a move on to get the time. And it was a flowing course, and the ground, the all-weather arena there, is one of those ones that's on a permanent water base that the water goes up through on an automatic system. And it's, I thought, a really good ground and would really ping the horses off. And so they were able to maintain that little bit of pace in the show jumping and still get a boing for their jump, which doesn't always happen. Some all-weather surfaces are just a bit dead, and you have to ride some of them faster, some of them slower. You have to know your surfaces. They're not all uniform, they're not all the same. So the 4-star short was incredibly exciting, like I keep telling you, the whole 4 days of competition was. And Michael Young and Fisher Chipmunk were in the lead. They were last to go, therefore, and Tom McEwen and Yaz Ingham on her world champion horse, Banzai de Loire, and Tom on Dublin, a horse that did very well in Kentucky, were second and third, and they jumped clear rounds, putting all the pressure on Fisher Chipmunk and Mickey Young. And he jumped a spectacular round. And I watched him jump through into the treble, and he came in on the lightest contact, almost looping the reins, and it worked really well for part A, worked really well for part B, and part C went with the front legs, I think. And so that was him out and into third place. And Yaz, very similar to what we had in the World Championships in Bretoni, Yaz was lying second. I think Michael was 2 fences ahead that time, and he had one down, and we all held our breath, and my goodness, poor man had the very last fence down. And so when they did their gallop round after the prize giving, I sort of rather reminisce that Fisher Chipmunk must be getting slightly bored of seeing Banzai de Loire's backside in the final run round after the prize giving. So that was very exciting. Tom on Dublin right up there. And then Michael Young fourth as well as third on Chipmunk on Kilcandra Ocean Power horse that he and his brother and his mum and his dad all own together. And I'm just looking to see Tom McEwen, of course, Mr. and Mrs. Lambert, and Deirdre Johnson, wife of the trainer who's busy at Ascot this as we speak, own Dublin, and Yaz is again Jeanette Ching and the Sue Davis Fund. So Sandra Aufart, who was on her wonderful chestnut horse Viamont du Mat, who I think is a real chance in Paris, was fifth, and a new face on the, and a very, very good looking face on the block of Germans young riders, Calvin Bochman, who was also in Kentucky, where he was told if he got a clear round, he would be in serious contention for the Olympics. And he survived a real moment in the lake at Kentucky. I thought he was absolutely brilliant to get back on and get the horse back online and go clear through the head of the lake at Kentucky. And then, most unusual, I think was maybe the only one in the competition, he came to a very quick stop at the edge of a neat drop down, a bit like the leaf pit drop at Burley, just a sheer drop, no fence. And he just went bang and stopped dead and stepped back. And then he retook it. And I can't remember if he trotted or cantered, but popped down it beautifully the second time. But it's almost one of those fences that you do need to trot at because they get such a surprise when the ground goes from being one level, woo, come suddenly completely to another level without any demarcation. So that rather put him out of Olympic contention, but you never know, he might still be in there. He was sixth on Alter de la Sens, a French bred horse belonging to his endless Bochman family, actually. I see three Bochmans owning it. He was sixth in the 4-star short, followed by French's Benjamin Massier and Figaro Fonroy, who was seventh. Jerome Robinet sounds French, but was for Germany, was eighth. And Julia Krajewski, our very own, well, not our very own, Germany's very own individual gold medalist at Tokyo, was ninth on a horse that we haven't seen so much of yet, 10-year-old by numero uno, called Nickel, the 21st, belonging to Sophia Rossell. And then Tim Price comes in on Falco, the wonderful horse that Sue Benson and he own, and just didn't quite crack the dressage this time, but usually does, and had a couple down in the show jumping, which knocked him back a little bit. And so that made our top 10. Dirk Schrader for Germany, a wonderful rider who keeps on going at top end, was 11th on Casino. And Clark Johnson from New Zealand was 12th on Menlo Park. Another one very much in the offing for the Kiwi Olympic team. But as you all know who are interested in the Olympics, there's only 3 riders that get on that team now, which is very, very little. And one traveling reserve who has the hell of a job. And Ros Cantor had it in Tokyo, and it's incredibly difficult because you have to try to be the most supportive person you can be. And in the back of your mind, you're rather hoping one of them go lame, and then you get your chance. It's a very, I always think playing reserve is the most difficult job in the team, and it's really important that you're very, very good at it, because those 3 that are in the team really need your support and don't need to be feeling guilty that they're in and not you. So I don't know who it will be for all these countries, but gradually the shortlists are coming out. We've already got an American squad of 3 and a remaining 4th person. We've got long lists becoming shortlists, shortlists becoming shorter lists. And I believe the Germans are sending some to Aachen, which is only 2 weeks and a few days before the trot up in Paris. And that's possibly going to be their final say, which is to my mind dangerously close, but they may prove to have exactly the right answer. None of us know. It's such a fascinating dichotomy of ideas as to whether you should give your team early, middle range, late. All that we all do know is that horses very rarely let you get away with an early decision that never changes. And certainly in Tokyo, there was a considerable amount of teams ended up using their reserve. sometimes before they ever got to Tokyo, or and therefore bought another reserve, or sometimes when they were in Tokyo. And England was decidedly one of the ones that didn't need Welsh Canter as their reserve. But it's luck of the draw. We all know horses. It is fantastically difficult to keep luck on their side and our side. So with that, I'm going to close down this rather long discussion about the Longines Luhmuhlen 2024 5-star long and 4-star short. And I hope you've enjoyed hearing a little bit of a different angle, a little bit of an inside story. Goodbye.